today. So first is Professor Jeff Hou from the College of Built Environments, the University of Washington. He is the director of the Urban Commons Lab and previously served as the director chair and graduate program coordinator for the Department of Landscape Architecture. His research, teaching, and practice focus on community design, design activism, public space and democracy, and social and environmental justice. He has written extensively on the agency of citizens and communities in shaping the built environments, with edited and co-authored and co-edited a number of books. So you can find out more about his research very easily. Our second guest is Professor Shenglin Chang from the Graduate Institute of Building and Planning, the National Taiwan University. And in addition to this professorship, she also holds a number of positions in the university and in other institutions as well. Her research and practice centers at the innovative approaches to public involvement in environmental issues through civic arts, community design participation, and social political activism. Her teaching focuses on issues related to landscape and identity across world cultures. She established a number of modules and courses in partnership with many faculties and students in East Asia, including Taiwan, China, and Japan. Thank you so much. And our third guest is Associate Professor Ian MacArthur from our UNSW. Ian is the hybrid practitioner working in the domains of experimental interdisciplinary practice, transcultural collaboration, sound art, experimental radio, meta design, and education change. His research projects include the development of an urban research platform called MATLab in Chongqing, Southwest China, in collaboration with industry partners, Prism Architects, and Cubed. So this MATLab platform focuses on developing education, research, and industry projects to incubate, develop, and present new site-specific, mediated, and issue-based concepts for the future of the cities. Among these, he wears many hats. He's also a producer, he's a sound artist. His work span across disciplines, from arts to technologies to education. So thank you so much. And among all our three guest speakers today, we are extremely honored to have you sharing with us your talk. And each speaker will have 10 minutes to present in order by Professor Jeff Hou, Professor Shenglin Chang, and finally Associate Professor Ian MacArthur. And in the end of it, we will have some time for question and answers of responses from our students. Thank you so much.
All right, shall I go ahead and share screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll take a couple of tries, but let me see. All right, are you able to see the first slides?
Yes.
Okay, all right. First, thank you for this wonderful invitation to join this conversation across different time zones. When I first accepted the invitation, I was in Taipei, but now I'm back in Seattle. All right, so as Leo has mentioned, for the past decade or so, the focus of my professional and academic work has been on the role and agency of people and community in transforming the built environments. In other words, built environment is something that is actively shaped by people who are engaged with it. And there's perhaps no better place to observe these phenomena in action than the city streets. For example, the way migrant workers in Hong Kong transform the streets of the financial district into places of weekly gatherings. And not just ordinary gatherings, but also performances that shift the role of the migrant workers from that of laborers to free individuals. In Tokyo, streets or more specifically sidewalks can also serve as sites of performances for young people who are not allowed to play music in the park, but for some reason it's okay to do so on the streets. This particular section of streets near the Yoyogi Park in Shibuya became one of the liveliest places in Tokyo as a result. A place for music of all genres, from blues and jazz to metal. The busy traffic on the street didn't seem to be a problem at all. In Shanghai, streets function as a space for similar kind of performances as well, even in the very commercial and retail center of the city. In the mornings, just for a few hours before the department stores are open on Nanjing East Road, the store entrances are taken over by citizens for this kind of social dancing. With the granite floor and shelter from the elements, the store entrances adjacent to the streets make for a perfect place of performances, for dancing and for watching. A free form of recreation in every sense of the word. Back to Hong Kong, streets can also function as an important site of resistance and protest, especially when no other channels of expression and representation are available. They function as a space for solidarity, for mobilization that can shape the politics of the cities and beyond. Resistance and protests can take on different forms, from occupation to sticky notes. The land wars that you're looking at right now, transformation that involve individual and collective participation. Streets as a space of resistance is not only a contemporary phenomenon. It has also happened historically. You're looking at Zhongrou, which is the main east-west boulevard or axis in Seoul. And historically, it has been a thoroughfare used by primarily aristocrats, traveling on horses and carriages. And in the old days, when the commoners meet or saw the aristocrats traveling on horses on the road, they would have to kneel down and bow. So they would much prefer to take the back alley, which over time became known as Pimago, literally translated as avoid horse alley. They are still around today as spaces of the working class, distinct from the brand businesses on the main roads. Right. Streets can also function as a refuge for people, particularly those experiencing homelessness. In Seattle, homelessness has been a major challenge for the city. During the pandemic, we have a lot of people sleeping on the streets with no adequate access to washing facilities to maintain personal hygiene. Before the lockdown, many of them can still access community centers, libraries, public buildings to access those facilities. But during the lockdown in 2020, the people on the streets left with few places to go. So working with a homeless advocacy organization in Seattle, we developed this DIY urban hand washing station called Seattle Street Sink to serve the folks on the street so that they can keep themselves clean during the pandemic. This was our first unit that you're looking at installed in an alleyway just outside a young adult shelter next to our university. This was the team that worked on the project. The City Council has since passed a budget last year to expand this project to the rest of the city for a total of 60 units. The streets can play an important role during the pandemic as well. And so within the remaining time, I just want to highlight a few themes that are relevant to an understanding of the case I just presented, and perhaps something that we can come back to during the discussion as well. So first, streets as open-ended spaces, as places that present infinite possibilities for supporting a diversity of activities in the city. Secondly, the making of those possibilities really rests with the people who occupy or make use of those spaces, neighbors and strangers alike. It is the people that respond to and recreate those spaces through a process of co-generation. It's one of the key spaces in the city that is openly accessible. Streets are an important place of visibility. They make visible individual and collective struggles, issues and challenges faced by various social groups in society. The collective visibility can be empowering, as in the case of the Lennon Walls in Hong Kong. Similarly, streets are important spaces of encounters as well. Encounters between strangers, between individuals and social groups, sharing the same space and time. Encounters that would have not occurred otherwise if there's no other space of common access. Streets can be a space of care on an everyday basis and during the times of crisis, as evident during the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are many cases in addition to the Seattle street scene in which we can see how people come together, engage in mutual aid, and to support each other at a time of crisis. Lastly, with all the above taken into account, city streets are perhaps best approached as lived spaces, spaces that support a variety of urban activities and are enacted and shaped by those who use them. It is through these lived spaces and enactments that cities function as inclusive and participatory environments. So I look forward to your comments and the discussion in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Hou. Thank you. So next, I would like to invite Professor Chang.
Yes. Okay. Well, let me share my. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, because I only have 10 minutes to talk about streets street life in Taipei, and my research is more about the transcultural landscape and identity. So after thinking through many times, and I realized probably the motorcycle is the element I really want to talk about. And I think if any of you come to visit to Taiwan, and you must understand how motor vehicle means to Taiwanese. A few days ago, a few colleagues of us, and we were talking, and we were talking to each other, and we realized for Taiwanese people, we really don't like to walk because we like to ride, motorcycles. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you see the screen and you see the face, these people, when they ride motorcycles, and some of them already wear masks, and the sort of the because of the mask wearing experiences are very popular or typical for most of Taiwanese people. So when the pandemic happened, COVID-19 happened, break out, and for Taiwanese, which enjoy wear our masks. We wear masks everywhere. So there's no issue about government forces to put the mask on. So that's the second thing I want everyone to be aware. And here is, we Taiwanese, we grow up with motor vehicles. And this is a picture probably like back in 1960s, 1970s. And this is how our family, parents, take all the children. This is like 1960s. I grew up like this, okay? And this is today. We are still doing similar things. And in the rural area, this is illegal, but people still doing it. So riding motor vehicle or motorcycle is something really for Taiwanese. And amazingly that I found out, our, statistic data in the 2020, which is 2 years ago, will be more specific. To more specific is like 1 year ago. And for Taipei and the New Taipei city, these two cities, we have about population like 7.5 million people, but we nearly have 5 million motor vehicles. And the density is like 6,500 per square kilometer. So you can see how dense it is. And to be honest, when I think more about what motor vehicle means to Taiwanese, I realize, motorcycle is like part of our body. So, it's eventually it's more like a human augmentation, for Taiwanese. And you see this very cute goddess in the left-hand side, right-hand side in your screen. And he is the prince of the Naza, Naza San Taizi. And he, people believe he has a two fire cycling, he's cycling everywhere. So sometimes we mention about our motor vehicle is like the Naza, Prince Naza, and with his fire cycling, and the people, ride motor vehicle everywhere. And for this behavior pattern creates lots of issues for our street. This is how people park their motorcycles. And for this side, what mentioned is, the sidewalk is, prohibited to park cars or motor vehicles. However, people do it everywhere. And you see the pavement of this sidewalk. And in the past, we have very thin pavement. And it's very easy to be destroyed by this heavy motor vehicle parking. And in order to improve our sidewalk, landscape architect industry eventually invent a thick pavement, and that eventually changed some industrial production ecosystem. And right now, for example, in Taipei City, we require this very thick pavement. And in order to change this kind of pavement, the entire Taipei City take about 10 years to do it. And right now, this is the way that you can see we still have this kind of parking pattern. So we in order to change this parking pattern, we need to change the design of our sidewalk. And this is a new model of how people park their motorcycle. And this design was firstly applied back in the 1996 or 1997, and but mostly happened in the big city. And for the rural area and the small cities, and we still have all kind of very chaotic different ways of parking motorcycle. And here is right in my neighborhood is right adjacent to the Taipei 101. You can see the Taipei 101 is here. And well, in order to adapt motorcycle parking and all different kind of things, and you can see the sidewalk become, you know, really sacrifice. We really sacrifice the sidewalk so much, and the tree, you know, the trees they end up has very limited area to really grow, and the pedestrian also has limited area to walk, and more you know more busy you know a sidewalk happen because you can see bicycle or riding here. However, for this kind of street sidewalk, this is still very luxury compared to my old neighborhood, and you can see the sidewalk is very narrow, and the street trees has limited time to grow. Okay, and I want to give you a very close look about the design of the new motorcycle parking, and it's cut through, and you can see the curb is here. So motorcycle riders, they pull their motorcycle in here, and this creates a new issue about the dangerous, you know, conflicts use of the street. For example, this guy or this old guy, and then they have to park their motorcycle while the streets still are, you know, very busy. And also this parking guy, he needs to put on these parking sticks, and he also walk on the street. Okay, and in addition to motorcycle, and we also have different kind of bicycle. Okay, and so you can see this sidewalk, we have motorcycle, and we have you know bike lane, and we have U-bike for sharing. And where is the people can walk? You know, here. Okay, and while people walk on the sidewalk, it's already very narrow, but we are serving our iPhone. Okay, and we also have other, you know, other type of user, for example, our pets. Okay, and I want to move on the other issue about motorcycle, and this is about when COVID-19 happened, and many business shut down, and because everyone in Taiwan almost can ride motorcycle, so they end up a switch to become a delivery guy. Okay, you can see many young guys, not only young guys, but even middle-aged, you know, people, and when they lose their job, and they end up, you know, switch to become the delivery guy, and so the delivery guy also use sidewalk. This is a bicycle delivery guy, and this is a motorcycle delivery guy. And here is how they, you know, doing their delivery process. They just park everywhere, and even doing their business on the road. Yeah. And in the end, I want you to remember, you know, this is how Taiwanese people, we traveling, or we moving around on the street, and we moving around in our urban landscape every day. So this is our campus, National Taiwan University, and here is a very busy street. I think Jeff probably is here. Yeah, and this is probably 2 minutes bicycle ride, right? You know, outside nearby the campus. So our everyday life is sort of switch between this kind of landscape, you know, body experience. So thank you for your listening, and I wish someday you can come to Taipei and during our motorcycle street life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chang. This is interesting, and I think maybe the Cambodian students might find some resonance from this to the life in Phnom Penh street. But maybe we have a chance to talk about this later in the end. Next, I would like to invite Associate Professor MacArthur.
Okay, hi everyone, I hope you can hear me. There's a very big storm happening at where I live at the moment, so that's what that background noise is. But I'll see if I can share my screen.
The screen is kind of like a, what we call it, only like a cropped section.
Yeah,
Of the
sort of
whole.
Is that better?
Yes, now it's full screen. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, look, thanks for inviting me. As I've only got 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about some themes I've selected. I should say that I've lived in and worked in and out of China for the last 20 years or so. Initially in Shanghai, then in Beijing, and since 2015, I've been working in Chongqing, which is a large city in southwest China. So I've put together a slide deck. I'm aiming, or I'm hoping to convey something of what Bruno Latour and others have referred to as the urban atmosphere of the city. Matthew Gandhi, the geographer and urbanist, talks about urban atmospheres as a focal point for critical reflections on space and subjectivity. He says a focus on urban atmospheres enables a richer understanding of collective forms of urban consciousness and experience. So for many Chinese people, Chongqing's a very famous place, but for Westerners, actually many don't even know it exists, despite it being one of the largest and most rapidly urbanizing cities in China and possibly the world. It's got a municipal population of around 32 million people. 10 million people live in the downtown urban area of Chongqing. And every aspect of this city and its identity, its culture, and its street life is shaped by its mountainous topography, the rivers, and the extremes of weather that the city experiences. And from the perspective of a designer or a design researcher like myself, Chongqing's vast urban and rural area provides many rich opportunities for investigating how design can help address related livability and placemaking challenges, hence my interest in this city. So downtown Chongqing lies at the point where the Yangtze River and the Jialing River merge. Now, this is the Jialing River, the Green River, and this is the Yangtze, the muddy Yangtze River. And the rivers are important because the local culture, which is known as wharf culture, reflects the city's history. The rivers brought trade, new arrivals through immigration, and along the way, the rivers brought new ideas and new technologies. And this has resulted in the development of a very curious and open population. So around the rivers, you can see plenty of scenes like these steps that lead up from the wharves and the rivers into the city. Excuse me. The city is famous for what's called bang bang men, and they're key to the local culture. They carry loads or deliveries, heavy weights anywhere in the city. They're kind of a disappearing culture, but they're unique to Chongqing. So the city enjoys numerous identities amongst locals and across China. It's known, for example, as the mountain capital. And in fact, it was China's capital during World War II. And it was chosen as China's capital during World War II because of its other identity as the city of fog. The fog made the city quite hard for the Japanese to bomb. And the city of fog is that kind of identity has come about as a result of the long dark winters, the long wet winters and subsequent thick fogs that enveloped the city during that part of the year. And the city is also referred to as the 3D city. The mountains and rivers have created this unique kind of 3D urban canvas that's been used to great effect by lighting designers and developers. This has actually become quite a research focus for me. I'm very interested in the urban media ecology in the city. And equally, the city is also known as one of China's 3 furnaces because of the extraordinarily hot summers that it endures. I lived in Chongqing for about 6 months in 2016, and for days on end, the temperature would exceed 45 degrees Celsius. And this drives Chongqingers underground, and tunnels are another defining characteristic of the life of the city. And they're often sites for walking, socializing, relaxing, eating, and dancing, as you can see in this photograph. A bit more on the theme of heat. Chongqing's food culture is perhaps one of the more important defining features of life in the city. And the dish beloved of all Chongqingers is hot pot. And the city is also known across China as the hot pot capital. And the chili is omnipresent everywhere. And many traders are just devoted to selling chili-related products. And Chongqingers love to eat. It's central to their identity and their lifestyle, and the food culture is extremely vibrant and diverse. Eating on the street is a key part of that culture, especially in summer. It kind of becomes a way of life. Other styles of eating and cooking other than the hot pot include the noodles, the dish on the left there, New Romian or beef noodles is really, really popular, and barbecue. And that image on the right it's a barbecue restaurant in a tunnel. At night time, street barbecue vendors are open in the evening and they cook till late. People come out and enjoy the food. So Chongqing is a city of extreme contrasts. Street life is it's lived within a diversity of environments and at dramatically different scales. You know, on the one hand, there's a lot of major infrastructure that's now in place. Urban planners are increasingly focused on the details of the city and the livability. There's an ever-expanding subway or monorail system, so it's pretty easy to get around. But the city it's really spectacular with dramatic juxtapositions of the formal and informal development that's taken place. It's a very complex environment in regard to that. Chongqing's developed so quickly. Rapid urbanization has resulted in what could only really be described as a radical transformation. So we see these extreme juxtapositions of urban and rural, formal and informal. The theorist Neville Mars, the architecture theorist Neville Mars, calls this type of urban conglomeration market-driven unintentional development, or MUD. These two worlds that kind of feed off each other. Urban farming is everywhere, even in heavily urban downtown areas, often in these liminal, in-between or otherwise unused spaces. And abject spaces abound, but these are not deserted or uninhabited places. Citizens traverse, play in, and true, they avoid some places, and there are many redundant or unused spaces, which are quite problematic. So life is lived under this constant process of transformation. The street is also a workplace for many. And local communities are really where this becomes really, really evident. The traditional exists alongside the modern, although it has to be said in China, modernity is a really contested concept. It doesn't mean Western, as so many Westerners have assumed. These are scenes from Erling Park in the city, where games like Go, chess, or mahjong and poker are widely played, often outside. And the street becomes, therefore, this site of play. Here, locals are relaxing at the riverside at the confluence of the two rivers. And the public space of local communities is also where the sheer scale of China's population becomes most apparent. And along with that, the wicked social problems such as the aging population, public health, unemployment, all become much more visible. But the uses of the street in Chongqing are incredibly diverse. Here we've got kids learning how to roller skate. And these are images from one of Chongqing's numerous CBDs, or central business districts. This one's Shopping Bar. On a weekend, incredibly vibrant, diverse, egalitarian use of public space. And I just want to draw your attention to these images on the bottom left here, the ubiquitous use of public space as a dance floor. For me, I think it's a good place to wrap up my talk. So from the outer edges of the city, as here in Dashui Chang, to the nightly mass spectacle that's seen in downtown Guangyin Chao, which is another one of the central business districts. It's amazing, it's loud, it's problematic if you're a local resident because of the noise. It's lit here not by streetlights, but by the shifting colours of the towering urban screens that blast out these endless advertisements. So Chongqing street life generates a very unique range of urban atmospheres. Now there's a lot more I could dig into in regards to techniques and the experiential dimension of this city, but I think I'm just going to stop there. So thanks for your attention. And I'll just stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Associate Professor MacArthur. Yeah, this is really enriching because certain things I hope it resonates to your own context and places. We have students here also, like some are in China right now. We have students from Phnom Penh. We have students from Sydney. Are they all the three cities where our students from at the moment? I believe so.
Yes.
So yeah. So from motorbikes, vehicles that are really part of the vibrant street life, to transformative shape-shifting activities and forms that occupy or transform or produces life to the streets. So these are all the things that what we've been thinking, or we try to think through this course as well. So our students, any questions or thoughts, ideas, something that resonates with you, whether it's directly related to your own research or not?
Lyno, I'm happy to take one for the team and go first.
Thanks, Nick. Go on.
Thank you all for your presentations. They were all really interesting, and I probably can speak for everyone saying it's made me really miss traveling. So I wish I could get around and see all the various cities you just showed. It's a bit weird not to travel for a couple of years. So question for everyone on the panel. comparing an Asian context to an Australian context, geographically, Sydney is arguably more in Asia than it is, you know, Western Europe or Britain, where some of our history comes from, our built environment history. I'm curious as to what you think about the large prevalence of scooters in your cities. It seems to me that Sydney would be quite suited to a lot of scooter usage. And I was particularly interested in the way that in Taipei, for instance, the use of scooters impacted the design of the street and the design of the sidewalk. But I also thought there was a bit of an implication that they're a nuisance. So I guess my question is, how do you think in an urban context or a street context about scooters compared to cars, compared to public transport? Because parking scooters is a challenge, but you move a lot more people on scooters using less space than you do cars, for instance. Would you like to see more public transport than scooters? Is it a better solution than cars? Should Sydney be looking to encourage scooter use? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Just so you know, actually, because Nick is from an urban planning sort of discipline, so I think that's why this question. Thank you, Nick.
So, should I start for some of
yeah,
my?
You started it. I think you should start.
Okay. Then Jeff will help me. Do you ride a scooter, Jeff?
Yes, sometimes.
Okay. Yeah,
especially in the countryside, but not in the city.
I don't think you have a scooter drive license, do you?
No, I ride illegally.
Yeah, thank you for Nick. I really appreciate your question. And my presentation is very physical, okay? And I didn't really dig into the social, political, and economic side of the scooter. And the reason that Taiwan has so many scooters and motor vehicles was due to the economy. In the back of the 1960s, 1950s, those old time, and the scooter or motorcycles are very flexible and very affordable, and the affordable in terms of the price, and the flexible means you know, families can use it to do everything, including deliver lots of stuffs and traveling everywhere. And the Taiwan, in terms of the physical scale, is very small island. So our city is in a small scale. And when I travel in, you know, so many cities, I realize not every place are, is easy to switch to the scooters, this type of vehicles. Okay, that's the one thing. And the second thing is because of Taiwanese, we grow up with scooters. So it's part of our DNA now. But for United States, for example, I live in United States for 20 years. And well, I think people, you know, when Americans, we are used to car, and the physical landscape is much larger, and it's really difficult to switch from cars to scooters, and also the entire infrastructure already built up for cars, and it's not so easy to switch to scooters. Yeah, so your question is an extremely complicated one, and we have to really study about the particular context of how people's daily culture and their life, you know, their family life history, and in order to think about the policy transformation. Yeah, that's my quick answer. Yeah, I wish that I can, you know, some other people also have other ideas to.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can add to what Shenglin has kind of said, they are definitely a nuisance associated with scooters or motorbikes because they're everywhere, but probably also because the street infrastructure is actually not very friendly to the scooter users or the scooter riders. It's really designed for cars, for larger vehicles. And so there are actually a lot of accidents. Involving pedestrians, scooter riders, and cars because of that. But I think what is what has been happening, I think more recently, is that there's sort of a proliferation of different mode of transportation in Taipei. And so you could be riding, you could actually rent a scooter, like a bike share, the scooter share program, to go to point A. And then from there, maybe you take a bike to get to point B. And then you could take a subway or take a bus or get an Uber rides. So you're not necessarily dependent on one type of transportation. And that's, I think it's actually really great to have that kind of flexibility. And so I just looked up the statistics on the different mode, the usage for different modes of transportation. And so Shen was right. It's the scooter usage is the highest in Taipei. 30% of the people depending on using transportation. And so I think the question, I think, is not only about a particular mode of transportation, but also how the infrastructure is really designed to support them. So that's something I want to add to the conversation.
Thank you.
One thing I want to add is in the rural area, people use scooters even more because the public transportation, system is really bad.
Jeff, do you think in Sydney that it's a cultural kind of thing as much as an infrastructure thing? Sydney is such a broad city. It's 100 kilometers across or more. And so Shengling's comments about the size of American cities kind of resonates as well, I think, here. I did some work with Piaggio for a number of years, exploring new ideas for how they could develop marketing and kind of promoting their scooters in Australia. And as a result of that, students were canvassing their families and people that they knew around attitudes to scooters in Australia. And one of the big things that came up, and this resonates again with what's been said, a lot of concerns around safety. A lot of parents are very concerned that if their kids were riding scooters, that they'd be in great danger. And I think the culture of Sydney it's a car city, and I think parents will be right to be concerned about safety and the riding of scooters in Sydney. So yeah, that's my observations on that.
And to circle back to Shengling's point, because we didn't grow up with it, it's harder to make that cultural change. We're not used to it.
Yeah, that's right, Nick. Absolutely.
Anyone else, especially students from RUFA?
I was wondering if there were any methods to reduce the amount of scooters on the streets, because it's apparent from your presentations that it's very, very dense. So 5 million of the people already own scooters on top of 7.5 million. And was wondering if there are any methods to reduce it as far as I'm concerned with greenhouse gases and traffic as well, just causing more environmental issues. Because from what I see in Taipei is that the streets were actually quite large and with broader sidewalks, whereas in Phnom Penh there isn't any sidewalk. It's all being taken up, but the amount of scooters are just increased even more. And I was just wondering if there are any methods to combat that that I could, put in relevance with Phnom Penh. Question to Professor Shenglin.
It's really challenge. It's really challenge. Yeah. Well, Jeff just mentioned that right now we have a different type of public transportations. However, scooter is so convenient. You can park anywhere, and you can go anywhere, and you can use it anytime. So it's I think my government probably already already give up the idea about reduce the scooters in terms of the numbers. However, we do try to work very hard in terms of how to change people's behavior pattern of riding scooters. And I didn't talk about the road design today. I only focus on the sidewalk today. And for our traffic rules, for example, right now scooters need to when scooters need to make the left turn, they have to do the right turn and the right turn. They need to make different turns and wait for longer time. And also in terms of the car drivers, for example, my father, he rides scooters and then he drive cars. So he teach me how to ride cars with all the scooters on the street. And I think that's also part of the skill that Taiwanese have to survive, with. Yeah. So it's really difficult to reduce the numbers of scooters because that's also against the Taiwanese culture. All my students, they probably all have scooters. And especially in the rural area, I was just mentioned that even teenagers, they have to ride scooters to go to school because there was no public transportation. And their parents are busy for the farm work and no time to take them to school. And also one thing you mentioned that the streets that you saw from my presentation was quite wide. And however, that's a very, the area itself is in the center of the city. I particularly choose that sidewalk because I want to see how different elements arranged there. But ordinary Taiwanese streets are still very not as wide as what you see from my presentation. Yeah, as for example, one small image that fly in and with a very narrow street and with very narrow area for the trees, and that's the typical neighborhood that we have. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. I too actually have a scooter myself, and I prefer it over cars or public transportation.
So you should, you should not doing your scooter riding. If you can do that, you probably will figure out a way and advise my government.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Professor Chang. I see two other people raising their hands, Eva and Richard.
You go first, Eva.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for these presentations. I didn't expect that this discussion today would be about scooter riding or motorcycles, but it's so nice and unexpected and really interesting. I come from living in Cambodia as well, so Shenglin, I agree. It's behavior change more than infrastructure change in many ways, isn't it? I'm going to change direction a little bit and go back to Jeff's talk. And you had one line which said streets are for co-generation, something along those lines. So I live now in Sydney, and I guess something I observe on my street, I live in an area now which historically is quite working class. So old workers' cottages with quite low fences, particularly at the front and between neighbours, where some of those houses are still standing and some of the fences are still low, and we have this great neighbourhood community. However, you can see, and I observe, as wealth levels increase, fences get higher and people tend to retreat inside. And it's something I noticed in Cambodia as well, living in Phnom Penh. So how, as designers, what do you all think we can do to encourage or kind of pull people out and encourage them to be more civically engaged, to want to co-generate their spaces and to want to connect with each other? Or are we fighting a losing battle?
Well, I think it's sort of a kind of a pendulum swing. I think if once people become more isolated or insulated from each other, I think there is a desire to become more socially connected, right? So the pandemic is actually a good example, that because we are having to social distance from each other. Obviously, like in my neighborhood, people started to talk to each other, even though they have to stand, like 10 feet away from each other. And we started kind of waving each other across the street as a form of acknowledgement, even though we cannot get close to each other. So years ago, we actually worked on a project in Japan, and it's all historic streets that were, everybody have their own gardens with high walls. But because of that, there's a very strong sense of division between especially the old timers and the newcomers. And so we, at a workshop, one of the students group came up with this idea of creating this kind of small pockets of spaces for people to interact. And then one of the homeowners actually offered to open their yards for neighbors to come in. So one day open cafe, and it became so successful that they wanted to do it, over and over again, to a point that the homeowner decided to basically donate his carport, his own parking space, because he's too old to drive anymore, and turn that into a park, so that neighbors can come together on a regular basis. People can greet each other, can have a space to kind of sit down and talk when they meet each other on the streets. So that's one example in which I think that kind of social interaction can happen, but it needs something to kind of catalyze that process, and that's, I think, the role that designers can play.
Thank you so much. I also see Mary raising the hand. Richard, if you don't mind, maybe we let Mary get it. Yeah, thank you.
Hi,
go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, thank you for the presentations. They were really insightful. I'm particularly interested in Jeff's kind of study on the space as a place for care and generosity, especially for homeless people. The theme that I'm studying is sidewalks, and my particular area is in Western Sydney. It has both homeless people and, I guess, local users that occupy the site. There is a negative perspective towards that area. So you see kind of just the same regular people that loiter around, but then a lot of people, just other local users from interviews, I guess, shop owners, they do have a negative perspective on that side and prefer not to interact with it. At most, it'd be very short interactions. So I'm just wondering, like, what would be, what are kind of just some ways to help both, I guess, homeless people and the local visitors? Because from what I'm seeing, it's all to do with like perspective and biases at the moment. And I'm sure there would be architectural interventions that would help out. I just haven't done a lot of study on this particular area, and this has just been through observation. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective on this.
Sure. I mean, in Seattle, there are constant conflict between neighbors and homeless people as well. People sleep on the streets. And so it's almost unavoidable, when that happens. But we also have quite a few tent city sites. So these are sanctioned encampments, by the city and run by mostly nonprofit organizations, and they are actually quite well organized. So you don't get into this kind of like trash being dumped on the streets and the tents that occupy sidewalk and things like that. And I think people sleep on the street because they have no other choices. If they are given a choice, I think many people prefer to go elsewhere in a space that has more privacy, is more secure, has more amenities. And so I think that's the solution that we should be looking at. And they are, inevitably people ended up on the streets. But if we can provide most of people with other choices, I think those conflicts can be reduced.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, now your turn.
Thank you so much, everyone, for incredible and inspiring presentations. Lots of food for thought for us as tutors and also the students as well. The question is for Ian, which is sort of really incredible presentation, or sort of, I guess, links to climate. You talk about the really sort of extreme climate, as we sort of heard in the background. And sort of, you showed the image of lots of people eating on the street, and now that was an inherent part of the city's culture, an important part to the city sort of thriving and people connecting in that way. So obviously, just interested in the role of the tunnel. Is that what happens when there's this real extreme weather, that people sort of retreat into those tunnel spaces, or are there other methodologies of actually dealing with changes in climate in that sort of seating outdoor seating environment?
The tunnels are a kind of, I guess, a historical legacy from Second World War in Chongqing, because the tunnels were made to avoid, like I mentioned, the Japanese, like, although the cities are very foggy and it was chosen as a capital to kind of avoid bombing, it was really heavily bombed. And so people would go into these tunnels to escape, the damage from the bombing. And those tunnels have been, reused in various different ways, subsequently. In terms of climate, there's a lot of underground areas of the city, a lot of underground thoroughfares. I'm not sure if you've been to Singapore. It's similar in some ways. But yeah, like there are restaurants in tunnels. There are other kind of you asked about other methodologies. I've seen restaurants with giant air conditioners outside of their premises, blasting cool air onto people. Not a very ecologically sound approach to dealing with climate, but nonetheless, that's one of the things that happens. But yeah, people really are impacted and are responsive and live their life in very many ways around the extremes of the climate in Chongqing. And I can see that in the future happening in Sydney, because you're probably aware that parts of Western Sydney, because of lack of foresight around global warming, are becoming potentially uninhabitable in the future in terms of their heat sinks. They just attract heat. And so Chongqing is fortunate; it's quite a tropical climate, so that there is a lot of trees and a lot of green. So you get these tunnels of trees in the summer that are another, I guess, method of kind of cooling the street. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, I'll guess. Can we take one last question? I know it's like 9 minutes past, but if you permit, one last question. It's a question from Norendo. And he wondered if the impact of the COVID-19 has changed the landscape of how architecture and urban planning is thought, especially in Australia or even in different places. So I thought this is quite an important question to raise in this shifting context. So any thoughts from our panelists? Thank you.
Well, maybe I can start. I think I live in Taipei most of past 2 years, and I actually noticed very little difference. Partly because we had so few cases of COVID in Taiwan. But in the US, I think one of the biggest transformation is the way temporary use of streets are now becoming the norm. So we have restaurants that have seatings and tables that are set up on the sidewalk and in the parking spaces, and what in Seattle we actually make some of the temporary closure of streets permanent. So in May of 2020, we turned 20 miles of streets into limited access. So only the neighborhood vehicles and bikes and people can access those streets. And this is unprecedented. The way that Americans giving up their cars, or giving up the streets, it's hard to believe. But this is happening partly because of the opportunity given by COVID to engage in those experiments, and people got used to it and quite happy to see the results. The streets are becoming more lively, and businesses are benefiting from those transformations.
Any other observation from Professor Chang or Associate Professor MacArthur?
I just want to add one thing, because Jeff already mentioned about Taipei, and we don't really have too much change. However, one thing I'm more aware of is people, we use public transportation a lot, like metro. However, after the pandemic, and people turn back to drive cars, so car and motorcycle become even more intense. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I was answering questions in the chat, and I didn't hear the question. So
sorry, no problem.
It could be repeated.
Yeah. So the question was has the COVID-19 has affected to the architecture or urban planning, or the way that basically people design or organize in public space?
I'm not sure I'm able to really comment too much on that. I don't know that in Australia, at least, we've seen any tangible change as yet. I think we're still grappling with the reality of the situation we find ourselves in. So I'm not sure I've got a response to that that's valuable.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you so much. Well, it's 13 minutes past, and thank you for please everyone. Thank you to our panelists for such a valuable, enriching, and insightful ideas and observations from across cities. I'm just rehearsing these keywords from Professor Hou's presentation, because I thought that will keep resonates so much with all of us, in particular for our students here in your research, that streets are open-ended, right? They're code-generated, their spaces of visibility, their spaces of encounter, their spaces of care, and ultimately it is space for lived experience. So I think these keywords are really, really relevant, and I think it's really helps summarize so much about how much street play an important role in the urban life. So I hope that we are able to connect with you in next encounters. But again, thank you so much for sparing your time and insights with our students.
Great, thank you.
So hopefully see you next time.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, ciao.